The darkness of space stretched endlessly in all directions. Among the distant stars, 12 massive warships moved in formation like predators circling their prey. These ships belonged to the Krev Dominion, an empire that had ruled this region for over 300 years. Their hulls were dark red, covered in armor plating that had seen countless battles. Each ship was over a mile long, bristling with weapons that could destroy entire cities. Commander Vexthor stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crimson Dawn. He was tall, nearly 8 feet, with scales that shimmered green and gold under the dim lights. His yellow eyes scanned the displays before him, showing the empty space around his fleet. A thin smile crossed his reptilian face. Today would be easy. Today the humans would learn their place. For weeks, the Krev had been sending messages to the human colonies in this sector. The message was simple: leave within 30 days or be destroyed. Vexthor had delivered such ultimatums to 17 different species before. All of them had fled. All of them had begged for mercy. The humans would be no different. "Commander," one of his officers said, approaching with a datapad. "The mining station is within range." Vexthor nodded slowly. The mining station orbited a small moon, automated and undefended. 47 human workers operated it, extracting valuable minerals from the lunar surface. It was time to send the humans a clear message. "Destroy it," Vexthor ordered. "Make sure the transmission is broadcast on all frequencies. I want every human in this sector to see what happens to those who ignore our warnings." The officer bowed and returned to his station. Moments later, the Crimson Dawn's main cannon charged with a deep humming sound that vibrated through the deck. A brilliant beam of red energy shot across the void, crossing millions of miles in seconds. The mining station never had a chance. It exploded in a ball of fire and debris, taking all 47 workers with it. Vexthor watched the destruction with satisfaction. He activated the communication system himself, his voice echoing across every channel in the sector. "Humans, you have been warned. Your colonies will burn one by one until you withdraw from Krev space. This is the fate of all who defy the Dominion." He closed the channel and turned to his crew. "Prepare a feast in the officers' quarters. We celebrate our first victory tonight." Far from the Krev fleet, hidden in the shadow of a massive asteroid, another ship waited in silence. The Nightfall was much smaller than the Krev warships, barely 300 feet long. Its hull was smooth and dark, coated with materials that absorbed sensor waves rather than reflecting them. To any scanner in the sector, the Nightfall simply did not exist. On the bridge, Captain Jake Morrison watched the massacre unfold on his screens. His jaw tightened as he saw the mining station explode. He had known many of those workers. Good people. Families. Gone in an instant because the Krev thought humans were weak. "Captain," Lieutenant Danny Cole said quietly from the tactical station, "I'm reading increased activity from the Krev fleet. They're moving into a celebration formation. Shields are lowering to minimal power." Morrison nodded. He was 42 years old with short brown hair showing hints of gray at the temples. His face was weathered from years of service, first in Earth's resource wars and now in the deep space fleet. He had seen enough war to know that sometimes talking was useless. Sometimes the only language bullies understood was force. "Amy," he said, turning to his weapons officer, Lieutenant Amy Walsh. "Are we in position?" Amy was 31, sharp-eyed and focused. Her fingers moved across her console, checking and rechecking every system. "All weapons ready, Captain. Railguns loaded, missiles armed. Stealth systems at maximum." Morrison looked around his bridge. 32 crew members served on the Nightfall. Every one of them was a volunteer. Every one of them knew this mission was dangerous. They could have chosen safer assignments, but they were here because they believed in protecting human colonies from threats like the Kreven. A message notification appeared on Morrison's personal screen. It was from Admiral Helen Grant, commander of Earth's unified fleet. The message had taken 3 days to reach him through the secure relay network. Morrison opened it and read the single line: "Show them what happens when you poke a sleeping bear." Morrison allowed himself a small smile. Those were the orders he had been waiting for. Diplomacy was over. Now it was time for action. "Danny, plot an intercept course," Morrison ordered. "I want us positioned between their second and third battle cruisers. Close enough to hit hard, far enough to break away clean." "Yes, sir," Danny replied. His fingers danced across his controls, calculating vectors and velocities. "Course plotted. We can be in position in 12 minutes. "Helm, take us in," Morrison said. "Keep us in their sensor shadow. I don't want them knowing we exist until our weapons start hitting them." The Nightfall moved silently through space, its engines running on minimal power to avoid detection. The ship glided like a ghost, invisible to the Krev sensors. Morrison watched the distance close on his display. The Krev fleet grew larger on the visual feed, completely unaware of the danger approaching them. Inside the Crimson Dawn, Vexthor was enjoying his feast. Platters of food covered the long table in the officers' quarters. His senior commanders sat around him, drinking and laughing. They discussed how easy it would be to crush the human colonies, how the humans would probably surrender before the 30 days were even finished. "They are a weak species," one officer said, raising his glass. "They waste time with diplomacy and discussion. They do not understand strength." "They will learn," Vexthor replied. "Tomorrow we will strike another target. Perhaps one of their agricultural colonies. Let them starve as well as burn." The officers laughed and drank more. Their shields were down. Their weapons were powered off. They felt completely safe in their formation, surrounded by 12 powerful warships. No species had ever dared to attack a Krev fleet directly. It would be suicide. On the Nightfall's bridge, Morrison watched the countdown on his screen. 3 minutes to optimal firing position. His crew was silent, focused, professional. This was what they had trained for during months of simulation and practice. Hit-and-run tactics. Strike hard and fast, then disappear before the enemy could respond. "Captain, we're in position," Danny reported. "All targets locked." Morrison looked at the tactical display. 3 Krev battlecruisers lined up perfectly, their engines and command sections exposed. Amy had calculated the firing solutions down to the millimeter. The railguns would strike first, kinetic rounds moving at a fraction of light speed. The missiles would follow seconds later, exploiting the damage to deliver crippling blows. "Amy, on my mark," Morrison said calmly. He took a deep breath. This was the moment that would change everything. After this, there would be no going back. The Krev would know that humanity was not weak. They would know that humans fought back. Fire! The Nightfall's weapons spoke in silence. 4 railgun rounds launched in rapid succession, invisible streaks moving faster than thought. Seconds later, 8 missiles followed, their engines burning bright as they raced toward their targets. The Nightfall had struck without warning, appearing from nowhere like a nightmare made real. The first railgun round hit the Krev battlecruiser Talon's reach directly on its starboard engine cluster. The kinetic impact carried the force of a small nuclear weapon, purely from speed and mass. The engine section exploded in a brilliant flash, sending shockwaves through the entire ship. Before the Krev crew could even register what was happening, the second round struck their command deck, punching through the armor like paper. On the Crimson Dawn's bridge, alarms suddenly screamed to life. Officers stumbled from their feast, running to their stations as emergency lights flashed red throughout the ship. Vexthor burst onto the bridge, his eyes wide with confusion. "Report!" he roared. "We're under attack!" An officer shouted back, his claws frantically working the controls. "The Talon's reach is crippled. The Shadow Hunter just took a direct hit to their weapons array. The Dark Predator is venting atmosphere from multiple hull breaches." "From where?" Vexthor demanded. "Who is firing?" "What ship?" The sensor officer stared at his screens, his scaled face showing pure bewilderment. "I don't know, Commander. Sensors show nothing. No ships, no energy signatures, nothing." 8 missiles struck their targets with devastating precision. The Shadowhunter's shield generators exploded, leaving the massive warship defenseless. The Dark Predator lost its entire port weapons bank, secondary explosions rippling along its hull. A 4th battlecruiser, the Steel Fang, took hits to its communication arrays and sensor clusters, leaving it blind and unable to coordinate with the fleet. "All ships, full shields," Vexthor commanded. "Activate weapon systems. Scan all frequencies. Find that ship." But the Nightfall was already moving. Morrison watched his tactical display as the Krev fleet scrambled to respond. They were activating shields, powering weapons, scanning desperately for an enemy they could not see. "Beautiful work, Amy," Morrison said. "Danny, move us to position 2. Let's give them something else to worry about." "Aye, Captain," Danny replied. The Nightfall glided silently through space, repositioning itself on the opposite side of the Krev formation. The ship's stealth technology was working perfectly, bending sensor waves around its hull, masking its heat signature, making it invisible to every detection system the Krev possessed. Amy was already programming the next firing sequence. "Ready on your command, Captain." "Targeting the Venom Strike and the Blood Moon." Morrison nodded. "Wait for it. Let them think they're safe on that side." On the Crimson Dawn, Vexthor was screaming orders. His fleet was in chaos. 12 massive warships firing blindly into empty space, their powerful weapons hitting nothing but void. Some ships were shooting at their own sensor ghosts, imagining enemies where none existed. "This is impossible," Vexthor snarled. "No ship can hide from our sensors. No weapon can strike with such precision." His tactical officer looked up from his console, fear evident in his yellow eyes. "Commander, I have a theory. The humans must have developed some kind of stealth technology, something beyond our detection capabilities." Vexthor's scales bristled with rage. "Humans, those soft, weak creatures, they don't have such technology." "With respect, Commander," the officer said carefully, "they do now." Another volley from the Nightfall tore into the Krev fleet. The Venom Strike lost both its primary engines, leaving it drifting helplessly. The Blood Moon took hits to its hangar bays, explosions consuming the smaller fighter craft stored inside. 2 more battlecruisers were crippled in under a minute. Morrison watched the chaos unfold with grim satisfaction. The Krev were powerful, but they fought like every other traditional military force in the galaxy. They relied on overwhelming firepower, heavy armor, and direct confrontation. They had never faced an enemy that refused to play by those rules. "Kevin, adjust our position," Morrison said to his helmsman, Lieutenant Kevin Ross. "Keep us moving. Never stay in one place longer than 30 seconds. "Understood, sir," Kevin replied. His hands moved smoothly across his controls, guiding the Nightfall through a complex dance of vectors and velocities. The ship moved like water, flowing around the Krev formation, always staying in their blind spots. Inside the Crimson Dawn, panic was setting in. Junior officers looked to their superiors for answers, but none came. The Krev had conquered 17 species, won hundreds of battles, dominated this sector for generations. They had never faced defeat. They had never been hunted. "Commander," the communication officer called out, "the Star Render and the Savage are requesting permission to withdraw." "Denied," Vexthor roared. "No ship leaves formation. We maintain defensive positions and continue scanning. This ghost ship must reveal itself eventually." But the Nightfall had no intention of revealing itself. Morrison had studied Krev tactics for months before this mission. He knew they were stubborn, proud, unwilling to retreat. That pride would cost them dearly today. "Amy, target their supply ship," Morrison ordered. "The one hanging back from the main formation." Amy's fingers flew across her console. "Locked on, Captain." "It's not a combat vessel. Minimal armor, no significant weapons." "Good," Morrison said. "Put 2 missiles into its cargo bay. I want it disabled, not destroyed. Let them spend resources recovering it." The missiles launched and found their target within seconds. The Krev supply ship shuddered as explosions tore through its storage sections. It began tumbling slowly, its engines dead, its crew frantically sending distress signals. Vexthor watched helplessly as his fleet fell apart around him. 6 battlecruisers were now combat ineffective, either crippled or so damaged they could barely maneuver. His supply ship was disabled, and he still had no idea where the enemy was. "Enough of this," Vexthor growled. He opened a channel to all his ships. "All vessels concentrate fire on Sector 793. Maximum firepower. If we cannot see this ghost, we will fill the space with so much weapons fire that it cannot escape." The remaining Krev battlecruisers turned their weapons toward the designated coordinates. Hundreds of plasma cannons and missile launchers prepared to unleash devastating barrages. They would saturate an entire region of space with firepower, destroying anything that might be hiding there. Morrison saw the energy readings spike on his sensors. "They're going to carpet bomb the area," Danny reported. "Massive weapons charge detected." "Helm, get us out of Sector 793, Morrison ordered calmly. "Move us to their rear formation." The Nightfall slipped away just as the Krev opened fire. The space where Morrison's ship had been moments before erupted in a hellstorm of plasma and explosions. The Krev fired for 30 full seconds, expending enormous amounts of ammunition and power. When the barrage finally stopped, the sensor showed nothing. No debris, no energy signature, no ship. The ghost had vanished again. "Impossible," Vexthor whispered. His hands gripped the edge of his command console so tightly his claws left marks in the metal. "What are they?" Morrison checked his ammunition levels. The Nightfall had expended 60% of its railgun rounds and half its missiles. Time to deliver one final message and withdraw. Amy, I want you to target the Crimson Dawn, Morrison said. Not to destroy, just to hurt. Hit their shield generators and sensor arrays. I want Vexthor to know we could have killed him if we wanted to. Amy smiled as she programmed the attack. With pleasure, Captain. The final volley was surgical in its precision. Railgun rounds struck the Crimson Dawn's shield emitters, overloading them in cascading failures. Missiles followed, destroying sensor arrays and communication dishes. Vexthor was thrown from his feet as explosions rocked his flagship. Sparks rained from damaged consoles. The lights flickered and died, replaced by dim emergency illumination. When the attack ended, Vexthor pulled himself up. His bridge was in ruins. His fleet was shattered, and he still had not seen the enemy ship. Morrison opened a general communication channel, broadcasting to the entire Krev fleet. His voice was calm and cold. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human vessel Nightfall. You attacked our people without provocation. You thought we were weak. You were wrong. Leave human space or every ship you send will meet the same fate. This is your only warning. He closed the channel and turned to his crew. Kevin, take us home. Full stealth protocols. The Nightfall vanished into the darkness of space, leaving behind 6 crippled Krev battlecruisers, a disabled supply ship, and one very confused and frightened Krev commander, who was beginning to understand that humanity was unlike any species he had ever encountered. News of the ghost attack spread through the Krev Dominion like fire through dry grass. In the capital world of Krev Prime, the military high command gathered in emergency session. Holographic displays showed the damaged ships, the confused sensor logs, the complete failure to detect or track the human vessel. For 300 years, the Krev had never suffered such a humiliating defeat. Supreme Commander Zarketh studied the reports with growing anger. He was older than Vexthor, his scales darker with age, marked with scars from countless battles. He had led the Krev military for 40 years, crushing rebellions and conquering new territories. He had never lost a campaign. This is unacceptable, Zarketh said, his deep voice filling the command chamber. How does one small ship cripple half a battle fleet? The military advisors stood silent. No one wanted to speak first and risk the Supreme Commander's wrath. Stealth technology, one finally ventured. The humans have developed something beyond our sensors. The ship is invisible to all our detection systems. Zarketh's yellow eyes narrowed. Then develop better sensors. Deploy quantum scanners to the sector. Create sensor nets that cover every approach vector. I want this ghost ship found and destroyed. Yes, Supreme Commander, the advisors replied in unison. And send 50 warships. Zarketh continued. I will personally command this operation. The humans must learn that their tricks will not save them from superior numbers and firepower. While the Krev prepared their response, the Nightfall docked at Firebase Delta, a secret human installation hidden inside a hollowed asteroid. The base was small but well-equipped, designed to support stealth operations in the Outer Arm territories. Only a few hundred personnel knew it existed. Morrison walked through the docking bay, his crew following behind. They were exhausted but satisfied. The mission had been a complete success. Not a single casualty on their side, and they had sent a clear message to the Krev. Commander Lisa Hayes met them in the debriefing room. She was 45 with short red hair and sharp green eyes that missed nothing. As head of special operations for the sector, she had recruited Morrison personally for this mission. Well done, Captain, Lisa said, offering her hand. Admiral Grant is very pleased with your results. You've bought the colony's valuable time. Morrison shook her hand and sat down. Time for what? The Krev won't give up after one defeat. They'll come back with more ships, better sensors. Exactly what we're counting on, Lisa replied with a smile. She activated a holographic display showing 3 ships, which is why you're getting reinforcements. 2 more stealth frigates will arrive within the week. The Shadow and the Wraith, both equipped with the same technology as the Nightfall. Danny leaned forward, studying the display. 3 ships hunting together. The Krev won't know what hit them. That's the idea, Lisa confirmed. Your mission is to continue what you started. Hit their supply lines. Destroy isolated patrol groups, make them afraid to move through this sector. Avoid direct fleet engagements where their numbers give them advantage. Instead, bleed them slowly. Morrison nodded. It was guerrilla warfare on an interstellar scale. the kind of fighting humans had perfected over centuries of conflict on Earth. The Krev fought with honor and tradition, standing toe-to-toe with their enemies. Humans had learned long ago that honor didn't matter if you were dead. "There's someone you need to meet," Lisa said. She gestured to the doorway where a man in a civilian work suit entered. "This is Paul Chen, chief engineer for the stealth program. He's been working on some upgrades for the Nightfall." Paul was in his 30s, thin and energetic, with oil stains on his hands despite the clean suit. He practically bounced into the room.
"Captain Morrison, it's an honor."
"I've been studying the data from your engagement. Your weapon's performance exceeded all projections." "The railguns worked perfectly," Morrison agreed, "though we burned through ammunition faster than I'd like. Which is why I'm installing expanded magazines," Paul said excitedly. "We can increase your loadout by 40% without affecting stealth capabilities. I'm also upgrading your missile guidance systems. The Krev will start using countermeasures, so we need to stay ahead." For the next hour, they discussed technical details and tactical improvements. Morrison learned that the Shadow and Wraith would have slightly different weapon configurations, allowing them to specialize. The Shadow would carry more missiles for long-range strikes. The Wraith would have enhanced electronic warfare systems to jam enemy communications. 3 days later, the 2 new ships arrived at Firebase Delta. Their captains came aboard the Nightfall for a strategy meeting. Captain Linda Shaw commanded the Shadow. She was 38, formerly a submarine commander in Earth's naval forces. She understood stealth warfare better than almost anyone. Captain Greg Turner commanded the Wraith. He was younger, only 32, but brilliant with electronics and communications. He had spent 5 years in military intelligence before joining the fleet. Morrison spread a holographic map across the conference table, showing Krev supply routes and patrol patterns. "We hit them here, here, and here," he said, marking 3 locations. Supply convoys heading to their forward bases. "These routes are predictable, and they're using minimal escorts." Linda studied the map carefully. "They'll adapt after the first attack. Change their routes, increase security." "Absolutely," Morrison agreed, "which is why we hit all 3 simultaneously. They won't know where to reinforce. By the time they adjust, we'll have destroyed enough supplies to slow their entire operation." Greg pointed to a cluster of Krev listening posts along the sector boundary. "What about communications? If they can call for help quickly, we lose our advantage." "That's where the Wraith comes in," Morrison said. "You'll jam their communications during each attack. Keep them isolated and confused. By the time their distress calls get through, we'll be long gone." They spent hours planning the operation, working through every detail. The timing had to be perfect. Each ship would strike at exactly the same moment, overwhelming the Krev's ability to respond. It was coordinated warfare on a scale that required absolute precision. 2 weeks later, Morrison watched from the Nightfall's bridge as 3 Krev supply ships moved slowly through space, escorted by 2 light cruisers. The convoy carried food, ammunition, and spare parts for the forward bases. Destroying it would force the Krev to pull ships back from the front lines for resupply. "All ships report ready," Danny said. He was monitoring communications with the Shadow and Wraith, each positioned near their own targets across the sector. "Execute in 3, 2, 1, mark," Morrison said. 3 ghost ships struck at once. The Nightfall's railguns tore through the escort cruisers before they could raise shields. Amy's missiles found the supply ships, carefully targeting their engines and cargo bays. The goal was not to destroy but to disable, forcing the Krev to expend resources on recovery operations. Across the sector, Linda Shaw and Greg Turner executed their own attacks with equal precision. 6 Krev supply convoys were crippled in under 5 minutes. The Krev communication network was jammed, preventing distress calls from reaching high command for nearly an hour. When the jamming finally cleared, Krev commanders found themselves facing a new reality. 3 separate attacks, perfectly coordinated, all successful. The ghost ships were not one vessel but multiple. They could strike anywhere, anytime, without warning. Zarketh received the reports with cold fury. He had arrived in the sector with 50 warships, prepared to hunt 1 ship. Now he faced 3, and his intelligence officers could not predict where they would strike next. "Deploy the sensor nets," Zarketh ordered. "I want quantum scanners covering every approach to our positions. Create overlapping fields that nothing can penetrate unseen." His officers scrambled to comply. They deployed hundreds of sensor buoys throughout the sector, creating a network of detection systems. The technology was experimental and expensive, but Zarketh didn't care about cost. He wanted the ghost ships found. Morrison studied the new sensor deployments from Firebase Delta. Paul Chen stood beside him, analyzing the Krev technology. These quantum scanners are sophisticated, Paul admitted. They're detecting minute gravitational distortions. Even our stealth system can't completely hide mass. Can you defeat them? Morrison asked. Paul smiled. Already working on it. Give me 2 days. While Paul worked his technical magic, Morrison coordinated with Linda and Greg. They planned their next strikes, studying patrol patterns and looking for weaknesses in the Krev defensive net. The enemy was adapting, getting smarter, but humans had spent centuries learning how to fight smart enemies. They're using predictable patterns, Linda observed during a planning session. Their sensor nets form grids. We can plot paths between the detection zones, like threading a needle, Greg added. Difficult but possible. Morrison nodded. Then that's what we do. We go where they think we can't go. We hit what they think is protected. We show them that no defense is perfect. The 3 captains raised their glasses in a silent toast. Somewhere in the darkness of space, 50 Krev warships waited, confident in their numbers and their new technology. They did not yet understand that they were not the hunters anymore. Humanity had turned the tables, and the predators had become the prey. 3 months of guerrilla warfare had transformed the sector into a nightmare for the Krev Dominion. Supply ships traveled only in heavily defended convoys, and even then, they sometimes never reached their destinations. Patrol groups refused to venture too far from the main fleet, knowing that isolation meant death. Krev commanders jumped at sensor ghosts and false alarms, their nerves frayed by an enemy they could not see or predict. Supreme Commander Zarketh stood in his command center aboard the massive dreadnought Absolute Power, staring at casualty reports. 38 warships lost or heavily damaged, dozens of supply vessels destroyed, hundreds of his soldiers dead or missing. And the 3 ghost ships continued to strike with impunity, appearing from nowhere, hitting hard and vanishing like smoke. His tactical officer approached cautiously. Supreme Commander, our quantum sensor net has detected anomalies in Sector 18. Possible ghost ship activity. Possible? Zarketh's voice dripped with contempt. I don't want possible. I want certainty. The humans have adapted their technology, the officer explained. They're exploiting gaps in our coverage. By the time we reposition sensors to close one gap, they've found another. Zarketh's claws dug into the armrest of his command chair. For 3 months he had hunted these ships. For 3 months they had eluded him. His reputation was crumbling. Other species in the Dominion were watching, wondering if the mighty Krev could be defeated. We need to force them into a direct engagement, Zarketh said finally. If they will not come to us, we will create a situation they cannot ignore. He pulled up a star chart, his claw pointing to a blue-green planet, New Terra, the largest human colony in the sector. 80,000 civilians lived on its surface, farming and mining, building a new home far from Earth. Prepare the fleet, Zarketh ordered. We move to New Terra. If the ghost ships will not surrender, we will bombard the planet until they do. The tactical officer's scales paled slightly. Supreme Commander, attacking civilians directly violates several interstellar accords. The humans violated our territorial claims, Zarketh snarled. They struck our ships without declaration of war. They hide like cowards rather than face us with honor. No, we will show them the price of defiance. On Firebase Delta, alarms blared throughout the station. Morrison ran to the command center where Lisa Hayes was already coordinating responses. The main display showed the Krev fleet changing course, all 50 warships moving in formation toward New Terra. They're going after the colony, Lisa said, her face grim. Zarketh just broadcast his demands. The ghost ships surrender or he starts bombardment in 48 hours. Morrison felt ice settle in his stomach. Can we evacuate the colony? Not enough time. Not enough ships. Even if we started now, we'd only get a fraction of them out. Danny Cole appeared beside Morrison, his face pale. Captain, we can't let them do this. Morrison knew Danny was right. But he also knew the math. 3 small frigates against 50 warships was not just suicide. It was pointless suicide. Even if they somehow destroyed 10 ships, 20, the rest would still bombard New Terra. Admiral Grant is sending the main fleet, Lisa said. But they're 2 weeks away. We need to buy time. Morrison stared at the tactical display, his mind racing. 2 weeks. How could 3 ships hold off an entire fleet for 2 weeks? It was impossible. But impossible was what they had been doing for 3 months. We hit them with everything we have, Morrison said. We target Zarketh's flagship. If we can cripple his command ship, maybe the fleet falls into disarray. Linda Shaw's face appeared on the communication screen. That's crazy, Jake. The Absolute Power is the most heavily defended ship in their fleet. We'd have to penetrate layers of escorts just to get in range. I know, Morrison replied. But what choice do we have? Greg Turner joined the channel. If we coordinate perfectly, hit from 3 directions simultaneously, we might cripple their flagship long enough to buy some time. Lisa looked at Morrison for a long moment. This could work, or you could lose all 3 ships in the attempt. Then we better make it work, Morrison said. He turned to his crew. Prep the Nightfall for combat. Maximum weapons load. I want every railgun round and missile we can carry. The next 36 hours were spent in feverish preparation. Paul Chen worked around the clock, upgrading weapon systems and reinforcing critical systems. The 3 stealth frigates loaded ammunition until their magazines were bursting. Every crew member knew this would be the most dangerous mission yet. Morrison gathered his crew in the mess hall. They looked tired, worried, but determined. I won't lie to you, he said. This mission could get us all killed. If anyone wants to transfer off, now's the time. No shame, no questions asked. No one moved. No one spoke. They had volunteered for this mission knowing the risks. They would see it through to the end. All right then, Morrison said with a slight smile. Let's show the Krev what happens when you threaten human families. The Krev fleet reached New Terra orbit right on schedule. Zarketh broadcast his final ultimatum, giving the colonists 6 hours to prepare for bombardment. On the planet's surface, 80,000 people huddled in shelters, knowing that even underground, they would not survive a sustained orbital attack. Morrison watched from the Nightfall's bridge as the Krev fleet arranged itself in bombardment formation. The Absolute Power held position at the center, surrounded by 12 battlecruisers in a protective shell. Another 20 ships formed an outer perimeter. The remaining vessels were positioned to intercept any approaching threats. They're expecting us, Danny said, studying the formation. This is a trap. Of course it's a trap, Morrison replied. But we're still going in. Shadow and Wraith, are you in position? Shadow confirms ready, Linda's voice came through. Northern approach, weapons hot. Wraith confirms ready, Greg added. Southern approach, jamming system standing by. Morrison took a deep breath. Execute in 60 seconds. Remember, we only get one chance at this. Make every shot count. The seconds ticked down. Morrison's hands gripped the armrests of his command chair. Around him, his crew prepared for battle. Amy Walsh checked her weapon systems one final time. Kevin Ross plotted their attack run, calculating the exact vectors needed to slip past the outer defenses. 10 seconds, Danny announced. Morrison thought about the families on New Terra, the children in shelters, the parents trying to stay calm, the elderly who remembered when humanity was safe on Earth. They were depending on 3 small ships and 96 brave souls. Execute, Morrison ordered. 3 ghost ships materialized from nowhere, streaking toward the Krev fleet at maximum velocity. The nightfall came from the west, railguns firing before the Krev even registered the attack. The Shadow dove from above, missiles screaming toward their targets. The Wraith emerged from below, its jamming systems flooding Krev communications with interference. The outer perimeter ships exploded as railgun rounds tore through them. Morrison had aimed for their sensor arrays and communication systems, leaving them blind and unable to coordinate. 4 ships went dark in the first 5 seconds, but Zarketh had prepared for this. His battlecruisers began firing the moment the ghost ships appeared, filling space with plasma and missiles. They were not trying to target the invisible ships directly. They were creating walls of firepower that nothing could pass through. Evasive maneuvers, Morrison shouted as his sensors screamed warnings. Kevin's hands flew across his controls, guiding the Nightfall through the storm of weapons fire. A plasma bolt passed so close that the Nightfall's hull armor scorched. A missile detonated nearby and shrapnel raked across the ship's flank. Hull breach on deck 3, Danny reported. Sealing bulkheads, Amy never stopped firing. Her railguns found targets with deadly precision, crippling escort ships and punching holes in the defensive screen. But there were too many enemies, too much firepower. For every ship they disabled, 3 more moved to fill the gap. The shadow took a direct hit to its port side. Linda's voice crackled over the radio. "I've lost engines. Can't maneuver. Going to stationary weapons only." Morrison watched helplessly as the shadow became a sitting target. Krev warships concentrated fire on the crippled frigate, their weapons tearing into its hull. Then disaster struck. A Krev plasma cannon found the Nightfall's bridge. The bolt penetrated the forward shields and exploded against the view screen. Kevin Ross was thrown from his station, slamming into the bulkhead. He didn't get up. "Kevin!" Danny screamed, rushing to his friend's side. But Morrison could see from the bridge it was too late. Kevin was gone. "I've got the helm," Morrison said, taking manual control. His fingers found the familiar controls, muscle memory from years of pilot training taking over. He guided the Nightfall through another barrage of fire, but they were surrounded now, trapped in a killing box. "Shield failure," Danny reported, his voice breaking. "Amy's been hit. Medical team to weapons control." Morrison risked a glance back. Amy Walsh was slumped over her console, blood staining her uniform. But even injured, she kept firing, her fingers working the controls with desperate determination. The Nightfall's stealth system flickered and died, damaged by repeated hits. Suddenly the Krev could see them. Every ship in the fleet turned its weapons toward the revealed frigate. "This is it," Morrison said quietly, but then he smiled. The silence was deafening. Morrison stared at his tactical display, watching the Krev ships hold their fire. Around him, the Nightfall's bridge was in ruins. Sparks fell from damaged consoles. Emergency lighting cast everything in red shadows. Amy Walsh was being carried away by medics, unconscious but alive. Kevin Ross's body lay covered with a blanket near the helm. "Why aren't they shooting?" Danny whispered. Morrison didn't have an answer. Then his communication console lit up with an incoming transmission. It was from the Absolute Power from Zarketh himself. The Krev Supreme Commander appeared on the screen, his scaled face unreadable. "Captain Morrison, your ship is crippled, your weapons are depleted, your stealth is gone. Yet you broadcast threats as if you hold the advantage. Explain this human arrogance." Morrison met Zarketh's eyes without flinching. "It's not arrogance. It's truth. You think destroying 3 ships ends this? You think bombarding New Terra makes you strong? All you'll do is prove to humanity that we can never negotiate with the Krev. You'll turn this into a war of extinction. And trust me, Commander, humans are very good at those." Zarketh studied Morrison for a long moment. "I have researched your species while hunting your ships. Your history is filled with violence, wars that lasted decades, conflicts that consumed entire continents. You fight each other with a ferocity that most species reserve for their greatest enemies." "That's right," Morrison replied. "And now imagine all that ferocity, all those weapons, all that determination focused on one target. You." The Krev commander was quiet. Then he said something unexpected. "You are different from other species we have conquered. Most beg for mercy. Most surrender after the first defeat. But humans, you study your enemy. You adapt. You strike from unexpected directions." He paused. "You fight like Krev." Morrison wasn't sure if that was a compliment or an insult. "We fight to protect what's ours. Nothing more, nothing less." Before Zarketh could respond, Morrison's long-range sensors screamed to life. Danny looked at the readings and his eyes went wide. "Captain, I'm reading massive energy signatures. Multiple ships emerging from hyperspace." The tactical display updated, showing new contacts flooding into the system. Morrison counted 50 ships, then 100, then kept counting. His heart leaped. They were human vessels and they were early. At the head of the fleet was the dreadnought Valor, bristling with weapons and armor. It was 3 miles long, a ship designed for one purpose: to fight and win major fleet engagements. Around it sailed battleships, cruisers, destroyers, and carriers. 200 warships representing Earth's industrial might and determination. Admiral Helen Grant's face appeared on Morrison's screen. She was 60 years old, with steel-gray hair and eyes that had seen too many wars. "Captain Morrison, this is Admiral Grant. We received your distress signal and pushed our engines to maximum. The unified fleet has arrived." Morrison felt relief wash over him. "Admiral, it's good to see you." "The feeling is mutual, Captain," Grant replied. She turned her attention to another screen, and Morrison knew she was looking at Zarketh. "Supreme Commander, I am Admiral Helen Grant of Earth's unified fleet. You are hereby ordered to withdraw from human space immediately." Zarketh stared at the display showing 200 human warships. His 50 vessels were suddenly outnumbered 4-1. The tactical situation had reversed completely in a matter of seconds. "This fleet," Zarketh said slowly. "It was hidden? Held in reserve?" "We've been building it for 10 years, Grant replied. "Preparing for the day when someone like you decided to test humanity's resolve. You're the lucky first customer." Morrison watched as Zarketh processed this information. The Krev commander had believed humans were weak, unprepared, easy prey. Now he understood the truth. The 3 stealth frigates had never been humanity's full strength. They were just the warning shot. "You lured us here," Zarketh said with what might have been admiration. "The stealth ships, the guerrilla tactics, all of it was designed to draw out our fleet so you could destroy it." "Not destroy," Grant corrected. "We'd prefer you leave peacefully, but if you insist on fighting, we're prepared to finish what you started." Aboard the Absolute Power, Zarketh's officers looked to their commander for orders. Some argued for fighting, claiming Krev honor demanded they not retreat. Others pointed out the obvious tactical reality. 50 damaged ships against 200 fresh warships. It would be a slaughter. Zarketh made his decision. "Admiral Grant, I request a ceasefire to discuss terms." "Granted," Grant replied. "But first move your fleet away from New Terra. Immediately." The Krev fleet slowly pulled back from the planet, withdrawing to a safe distance. On New Terra's surface, 80,000 colonists emerged from their shelters, looking up at the sky where humanity's fleet had arrived to save them. Children cried with relief. Parents held each other. It was over. The negotiations took 3 days. Zarketh met with Admiral Grant aboard a neutral station, hammering out the details of Krev withdrawal. The terms were harsh but fair. The Krev would abandon all claims to human-occupied systems. They would pay reparations for the destroyed mining station. Most importantly, they would recognize humanity as a sovereign power, not a species to be conquered. When Zarketh finally left, he stopped to speak with Morrison one final time. The Nightfall was being repaired at Firebase Delta, though it would be weeks before the ship was fully operational again. "Captain Morrison," Zarketh said, "I underestimated your species. That was my greatest mistake." "Yes, it was," Morrison agreed. "But you learned from it. That's more than most do." "Your tactics were unconventional," Zarketh continued. "Dishonorable by our standards, but effective. I will recommend that the Dominion study human warfare methods. Perhaps we have much to learn from you." After Zarketh departed, Morrison visited Amy Walsh in the medical bay. She was recovering well, her injuries serious but not life-threatening. She smiled when she saw him. "Did we win, Captain?" she asked. "We did," Morrison replied. "Thanks in large part to your shooting. Even injured, you kept firing." "Someone had to protect this bucket," Amy said with a weak laugh. Then her expression grew serious. "Kevin?" Morrison shook his head. Amy closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks. Kevin Ross had been her friend, her crewmate. His death would haunt them all. 2 weeks later, a ceremony was held at Firebase Delta. Captain Morrison stood before the assembled personnel, wearing his dress uniform. Admiral Grant pinned the Star of Valor to his chest, humanity's highest military honor. Amy Walsh, Danny Cole, and every surviving crew member from the 3 stealth frigates received commendations for their service. But the ceremony that mattered most to Morrison was the quiet one afterwards. Kevin Ross's name was added to the memorial wall, joining the names of others who had died defending humanity's colonies. Morrison stood before the wall, his hand touching Kevin's name. "We did it, Kevin," he whispered. "We kept them safe." Admiral Grant found Morrison standing there an hour later. "The Nightfall is almost repaired," she said. "We're forming a permanent stealth operations division. You'll be in command with the rank of Commodore. Linda Shaw and Greg Turner will command their own squadrons under you." Morrison nodded slowly. "And the Krev?" "They're retreating to their core territories," Grant replied. "Our intelligence suggests they're having internal troubles. Some of their subject species are asking questions, wondering if they too could resist Krev rule. You started something, Jake. You showed the galaxy that humanity won't be pushed around." She paused, looking at the memorial wall. "But this is just the beginning. Other species are watching. Some will respect us. Others will want to test us. We need captains like you, ready to defend our colonies when diplomacy fails." Morrison thought about that. 3 months ago, he had been following orders, hoping to avoid war. Now he understood that sometimes war was inevitable. Sometimes the only way to achieve peace was to be so dangerous that no one dared attack you. "I'll do it," Morrison said, "on one condition. We train more crews, build more ships. So next time, we don't have to sacrifice good people like Kevin." "Agreed," Grant said. 6 months later, Morrison stood on the bridge of the rebuilt Nightfall, watching as 10 new stealth frigates launched from hidden shipyards across human space. Each crew had trained under veterans of the Krev campaign. Each captain understood the new doctrine: strike fast, strike hard, vanish like ghosts. Danny Cole served as Morrison's executive officer now, having earned his promotion through skill and courage. Amy Walsh had returned to duty, her injuries healed, her determination stronger than ever. New crew members filled the gaps left by those lost in battle. The Nightfall departed Firebase Delta, joining the Shadow and Wraith on patrol. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, other species plotted and planned, some friendly, others hostile. But they all knew one thing now. Humanity was no longer prey. Morrison looked out at the endless expanse of space. Earth was 40 light-years away, a blue dot lost among billions of stars, but humanity had spread beyond Earth, building colonies, establishing bases, claiming their place among the stars. And if anyone threatened those colonies, if anyone thought humans were soft or weak or easy to defeat, they would learn the same lesson the Krev had learned. They would learn what it meant when human ships struck without warning.